Charlotte's dress. Jeff thought it was a little odd that his new neighbors, who only moved in that morning, were already having a garage sale. And doubly odd that they were holding this garage sale at night. But it didn't matter because Jeff was in trouble. He wasn't a perfect man, and although he loved his wife very much, he nearly forgot their anniversary would be the next day, and he hadn't yet bought her gift. The sudden realization dawned on him as he was driving home from work. He and Charlotte lived in Penwell, a small town in Illinois surrounded by smaller towns in the middle of corn and soy country. The only things open that time of night were convenience stores and bars. As he pulled into his driveway, he saw the light on in his neighbor's garage and multiple tables that displayed various gimcracks and gewgaws. It was his last hope. He walked around from table to table and looked at the bizarre assortment of chattels the new neighbors had for sale. There was an ugly skeletal doll, carved from wood. It had an oversized head, protuberant eyes, and a grimace with pointed needle-like teeth. In its minuscule hands, it held a tiny little spear. Not in my house, Jeff thought to himself with a shiver. He looked at a collection of books and took note of the author names. Jack Torrance, Ben Mears, and William Denbrough. Never heard of them, and I doubt Charlotte has either. Besides, who wants to get dusty old books for their anniversary? Next to the books sat a black cube with intricate gold embellishments.
Imagine.
If I give Charlotte a paperweight for our anniversary, she's likely to give me a divorce in return. He almost resigned himself to the idea that he'd have to face the consequences of his forgetfulness when he happened to spot a radiant dress hanging from a rack and covered in plastic. The black gown had red accents and was clearly made of silk. It truly had an elegance about it that was worthy of his wife's beauty. What's more, it looked to be just the right size. He took it straight over to the table where his neighbors sat. The man at the table was a strange-looking sort of fellow. He was thin and very pale, with black, beady eyes, an aquiline nose, and a pencil-thin mustache waxed and curled. His raven-black hair was combed straight back and held in place with copious amounts of pomade. His wife sat next to him. She was a short, plump lady with curly, carrot-orange hair that was a little mussed. Her smile revealed she was missing more teeth than she had, and her garish lipstick contrasted badly against her waxy complexion. "Look, my love, our new neighbor is a man of good taste. He is buying your old dress you wore on our honeymoon." The man's high and nasally voice bore a strong accent, which Jeff presumed to be Eastern European. "Oh yes, but I had much different figure back then," his wife said with a chuckle and a husky voice. "This dress is made of genuine spider silk." Jeff squirmed at the thought of millions of spiders being used to make the fabric. He hated the wretched things. Then the woman said, "Very beautiful, very rare." Hearing this, Jeff's unease at the thought of spider silk was at once superseded by concern for cost. Rare and sentimental always equated to expensive, and he wasn't carrying much cash. How much are you asking for it?" Jeff asked tentatively. "I think," the man started, then reflected for a moment. $20. Flabbergasted at such a deal, Jeff pulled out a crisp bill and paid the gentleman. "Anything else, my dear?" asked the woman with a saccharine smile. You wouldn't happen to have a box?" "Of course." The two spoke in unison. The next day started well enough. Charlotte fixed them both breakfast, and while Jeff gobbled up the victuals, Charlotte's attention happened to be on something outside their kitchen window. "That's odd," she said. "Our new neighbors, they're having everything put back into the moving van. That has to be some kind of new record, don't you think?" Jeff stood up and looked out the window with his wife. Although professional movers were loading box after box into the back of the U-Haul, the strange couple was nowhere to be seen. Jeff told Charlotte about seeing the new neighbors the previous night but conveniently failed to mention the details of the hows and the whys. He told her how he thought they seemed somewhat peculiar, then joked. Maybe they decided to move out because their house wasn't haunted. He and Charlotte snickered at the jab, but it was a mirthless kind of laugh. Charlotte turned her attention to doing the dishes, and Jeff helped dry them. "So, when are we giving each other our presents?" Charlotte asked casually. "Well, I thought we'd go into Springfield for supper, to that pizzeria you like so much, the one that has the good calamari. I figure we can exchange gifts before we leave. That sounds nice. But why wait? You didn't forget, did you? Are you stalling for time? Charlotte's tone was jovial. No. Of course not. Jeff replied, maybe a little bit too defensively. I just thought it would be better to wait until this afternoon. Let's say 3 o'clock. When the time arrived, Charlotte was the first to present her gift. It was a small box, wrapped in silver and blue paper. A card taped to the package read, "To my loving and thoughtful husband." Jeff felt shame rising in him like floodwaters. He cleared his throat, tried to shake the feeling, and unpeeled the wrapping. Its contents revealed a leather-strap chronograph watch. It didn't look cheap. "I love it," he said and gave her an appreciative kiss. All the while, he did his best to stifle the feeling of crushing guilt. Jeff reached under the sofa where he hid the dress and handed it to her. "Sorry, I didn't gift wrap it. You know, I kinda suck at that anyway." "I know," Charlotte said with a coy smile and a wink. She lifted the lid on the box, and her eyes widened. "Oh, Jeff," she said. Do you like it? Like it?" "Oh, honey, I love it. It's positively radiant. It looks like something a celebrity would wear." She sized it up against her body. "I'm going to try it on right now." Charlotte hurried to the bedroom, and Jeff sighed with relief. Despite his momentary bout of forgetfulness, he managed to get his wife a gift she truly loved for their anniversary. Charlotte yelled from the next room, "Did you keep the receipt just in case it doesn't fit?" Jeff hadn't considered that. At least he hadn't dwelt on it. Butterflies did loop-de-loops in his stomach. "Don't worry about that, honey. We'll get you taken care of if it doesn't fit," he called out to the closed bedroom door. Charlotte must have been satisfied with the answer, because she didn't say anything else. Jeff sat quietly on the couch waiting for his wife to come out and show off her new dress for what seemed to him to be a short eternity. A tremendous crash came from the bedroom, followed by a loud crunching and popping sound. Charlotte groaned and then screeched. Jeff sprang from the couch. "Charlotte, are you okay?" But Charlotte gave no reply. He darted through the living room, but before he could reach the bedroom door, it burst open. He heard his wife's voice from within their bedroom, although it had a strange quality, a kind of warbling, tinny resonance about it. "I don't know, honey," said Charlotte. "Does this dress make my butt look big?" Jeff shrieked. The thing he saw still had his wife's face, but the rest of her body, its body, was that of a gigantic spider. Its shiny black form bore the same red accents as the dress. The creature was hardly able to squeeze its bulbous thorax through the doorway. The doorframe splintered and split as it pushed its way through toward Jeff. His legs faltered, and he collapsed into unconsciousness. Charlotte wasn't interested in going to the pizzeria anymore. Instead, she'd be dining in. Skeleton on the porch. Tommy Morgan did not have the best life. Coming from a broken home, the young 11-year-old only experienced the worst. His father would return home drunken like a skunk, and he would get into heated arguments with his wife over money and how, since he was the bread maker, he could do with his earnings what he saw fit. Tommy's mother would do chores around the house, her eyes red from sobbing. Tommy himself would receive whippings from his father for the slightest of offenses. It always came with the hollow assurance that it would build character. There were many things that the boy despised, his father being number one on his list. A day never went by in which he dreamed of getting revenge on him, but it was all but a fantasy. His father was big and stout. As far as Tommy was concerned, his father was an unconquerable Goliath to his David. Thoughts of running away crossed his mind, but he did not have the heart to abandon his mother to the brute. He thought that he would never be able to get rid of him, at least until that day. One of the few joys Tommy had in life was Halloween. On that holiday, he could discard his miserable life and become anyone he wanted to be. The candy and decorations were also a plus for him. His father, despite everything else, would at the very least spruce the house up for All Hallows Eve with a spider made of old rags here and a papier-mâché ghost there. On a particular day, he brought home a skeleton. The skeleton was roughly his size, being 6 feet 5 inches in height. It was dry with some visible cracks around the ribs and spine. It was missing a few upper teeth in the back, likely from years of wear and tear. Its hollow eye sockets were jet black and devoid of life. The bones, yellow with age, made a slight thump sound against the wall any time Tommy's dad would swing the ancient artifact back and forth. It looked absolutely fragile in his colossal hands. He explained that he got the decoration from an old antique store, bragging about how much he swindled the store owner to get the skeleton cheap. He placed the skeleton in the bench on the porch and returned inside without much thought. Resuming his drinking, once more he got into a fight with Tommy's mother, this time over her wanting new curtains. Tommy left the house and sat on the bench with the skeleton. He vented his complaints to the decorative piece, not thinking much about whether he would be heard, but he nevertheless felt at ease talking to someone. From there on out, Tommy found himself loving the skeleton. Each day he would talk to it and would take care of it. Anytime leaves would fall on it, Tommy would blow them off with a leaf blower. When it rained, Tommy covered the skeleton with rags. For a second, he could have sworn that the skeleton was receptive to his acts of kindness. During one instance, when he was gently wiping the skeleton's arm, Tommy heard whistling. From the direction he was looking, it appeared that its teeth were clattering. However, Tommy chalked it up to the wind blowing through the skeleton's mouth. Beyond his days spent with the Halloween decoration, Tommy's life continued as normal. His parents would argue over the tiniest of offenses, and his mother would resume doing chores around the house with tear-streaked eyes. Tommy would continue to receive beatings that his father thinly veiled as discipline. During dinner, Tommy accidentally dropped a glass, causing it to fall on the floor and break into a million pieces. As his father was beating him, there was a sudden thumping coming from the porch. Alarmed, the three paused to listen to the sudden noise. Whatever was out there paced back and forth on the porch, stomping as hard as its foot would allow. With bated breath, Tommy's father approached the door, opened it, only to see the skeleton in its sitting position. Once more, it was attributed it to the culprit being the wind. For the next few days, the thumping would continue. The repetition ate away at Tommy's father, spurring him to leave home and remain out for longer hours. In his dreams, he was tormented by the skeleton. He would find himself in bed, alone. The skeleton appears at the foot of his bed, and it slides over his body, just coming short of his neck. His dad would wake up with a jolt and refuse to sleep the rest of the night. However, Tommy's dreams were starkly different. He would receive sweets and other confections, and his father would be far away. The skeleton would stand by looking at him in the distance. Eventually, Tommy's dad couldn't take it anymore, and during a stormy night, he gathered the skeleton and tossed it in the back of his truck with little hesitation. Poor Tommy was awakened from his deep slumber only to see the skeleton that he cherished being driven away. He ran to the door, but the truck bolted to life and bucked its way off the driveway. Heartbroken, Tommy returned to his bedroom and cried himself to sleep. The next day, his father returned, and so did the skeleton. Surprised at first, Tommy was grateful that his friend was back. Even more bizarre, his father was kinder. When Tommy accidentally broke a plate, instead of the whipping he was anticipating, he was instead given a stern, but fair warning about how he could have hurt himself. There were no more arguments over money, which meant that his mother was now at peace. Their marriage also improved, and the two seemed more in love with each other in all the years of their life. However, Tommy couldn't help but notice that his father was acting weird. He moved around as if he were a stranger in his own skin. His legs would wobble, and knees buckle from the smallest of movements. Sometimes the skin around his face would slide, forcing him to push it back up with his spare hand. His jaw would hang agape as he ate, which translated to shoving food into his mouth at the back of his throat. Tommy learned the truth on Halloween. When he stared at the skeleton on the bench, there were no cracks on the ribs. In fact, instead of being ancient, the skeleton appeared to be fresh and, dare say, even more lifelike than before. It even had a full set of teeth. Shocked, Tommy turned to look at his father, who stared at him for what seemed like an eternity before giving a wink. The cleansing. It was an average Friday night in the town of Hicktown, Alabama. The cousins were kissing, the Baptists were brimstoning, and everyone was stirring sugar in their evening iced tea. Pastor Alltruth was conjuring up a plan of which he believed was ingenious. At the end of Cotton Lane, there was a couple of old ladies claiming to be aunts. But Pastor Alltruth knew the truth. Those old ladies were the town Lesbos, and they were detouring the Holy Spirit from resting in his God-fearing town. In Pastor Alltruth's church, the Double-Barrel Baptist Church of Blue-Eyed Jesus, there was a group of wonderfully underaged Southern belles: Martha May, Sarah Bell, Linda Turnip, and last but not least, Marilyn. I'd give them each a short biography, but I'm currently behind in the education department, so I don't got that kind of time. Anyway, this special group of girls are together in a small church group called His Servants. They go around and offer their house cleaning services to the elderly and divorced. These girls can whip up a good meal, clean the house, and have your clothes strung on the line all in an afternoon's work, as all worthwhile women should. Pastor Alltruth knew these girls were just what he needed for the job. Their pretty faces and stubborn religion ought to seduce the old hags straight to Sunday service. With a plan well set and the subjects to enact it, Pastor Alltruth gave Martha May a ring. "Hello, Sister Martha," Pastor said in a pleasant tone. "You know those sweet elderly women on the end of Cotton Lane? The aunts." Martha replied. "Yes, the aunts," Pastor answered. "Well, they have lost a lot of mobility in their old age, and I was thinking, what if us as a church sent you and your girls out to their house tomorrow to give it a good cleansing?" Martha accepted the idea and without hesitation notified the rest of the girls about tomorrow's task. They all seemed happy with the job, having no idea the true extent of cleansing that old house really needed. When the morning came and the cocks had doodled their morning cry, the girls set off for Cotton Road. Martha had picked up Sarah and Linda, but Marilyn had already beat them to the door of 699 Cotton Lane, for she lived in the trailer park just halfway down the block toward Black Lynch Creek. "Good morning, sisters," she said cheerfully to the others with a wave. "Good morning, Marilyn," they answered. "Now we best get to workin'," Martha started as she knocked on the door. In a few moments, the door had finally opened and the girls were greeted by a short little old woman. "Hello, girls," she said in a voice well worn. "You must be here for the cleaning." Martha nodded with a smile, although slightly confused that the old women had expected them. "Well, come in," she said. "Make yourself at home while I get you girls something to drink." At that, the girls started looking for the supplies to clean. Linda found a vacuum cleaner in the living room closet, but under a bit closer inspection, they found that the cord had been cut off. "Well, that won't help us much," she said, holding what remained of the cord. As Martha and Linda looked in the living room, Sarah decided to give a look down the hall. As she peeked through the doorways of the rooms she passed, she noticed something off. It did not seem as if any of these rooms were for living in. Every room had only a single item, and none in which seemed to relate. The first doorway she passed had some Catholic candles. The second door had a leopard print one-piece swimsuit in a glass case. The glass was signed in lipstick. As she gazed into the third door, a blood-fondling scream left her. At this, the other girls rushed over to see what had happened to poor Sarah. "Are you okay, Sarah?" Martha said in a controlled manner of panic. I don't know," Sarah said with a cry. "What did you see?" At this, Sarah began struggling to compose herself. She looked up, and while looking into Martha's eyes, she said, "Those old ladies there, they're no aunts, no one's aunts but the devil's. They're lesbians." At this, Martha and Linda were full of fright. In the center of the room sat a single piece of paper. It was a marriage certificate of gay marriage. "Witches," Sarah cried. "They are gonna eat us." The girls began to frantically run for the door, but as they sprinted down the front steps, Linda turned. "Wait, where is Marilyn? We can't leave Marilyn." So the girls, being faithful to a friend, went back into that God-forsaken home. The living room was void of people. The hall and its mysteriously kinky rooms were empty as well. But there was one place they haven't checked. They shuddered at the thought of ascending the stairs, but they knew it had to be done. For Marilyn. Martha went first, then Linda, and finally Sarah. As they crept up the staircase, they shuddered at the thought of what they may find. "It's probably too late," Sarah said, with hopeless tears already streaming down her cheeks. "They've converted her to a lesbian." "Stop it with the hopelessness, Sarah," Martha whispered harshly. If she's a lesbian, we'll just have another opportunity to riz someone back to Jesus's heavenly blue eyes. The thought of that comforted Sarah, and she wiped away her tears. When they reached the top of the stairs, they headed towards the first room they saw. As Martha opened the door, she paused as the old woman greeted her. "Oh, hello, sweetie," the old woman said. "Marilyn was just helping me bring up a meal for my partner Mary. Her health hasn't been at its best lately." She then turned around and proceeded to turn toward her partner and commit an act of absolute abomination. As she bent over Mary, Martha's blood ran cold, and her friends went pale. Except for Marilyn, for she was in the dark on this whole awesome plot line. Marilyn was just staring off with a content smile, daydreaming about singing with cows or something of that sort, as Marilyn would. Anyway, the girls, not including Marilyn, watched in absolute horror, and the old women left a soft kiss atop poor Mary's forehead. "Now get better, honey," the old woman said in her well-worn voice. At this ghastly sight, Martha broke. In a rush of disgust and horror, she lunged back toward the stairs. "I think I'm gonna vomit," she yelled as she hurtled down the stairway. Linda and Sarah rushed after her, but not for long, because as Martha reached the last step, she let out a groan. Chunks blew from her lips as she threw up all over the floor. Still running and with no intention to stop, Sarah tripped in the mess left behind, and Linda fell with her. It was a grim night to be part of the His Servants girls of the Double Barrel Baptist Church of the Blue-Eyed Jesus. But this turn of events did not stop them, for they soon got out of the house in pieces. Without Marilyn, of course, for they knew it was too late. Sarah pulled out a match and Linda put some sticks under the OL front porch. Soon, the house and the sinfulness inside was left as it is now, burning and locked away, no longer able to harm the innocents of the gallant South.